We've been growing since 1975, so we got about 40 years growing here in this area. We've got several greenhouses. And like Alan said, the best price you get is on the season extension, so we had this brilliant idea of we're going to farm year-round. But that takes energy. And am I blocking it? One of the things, so we 2 years ago submitted a cogeneration project and got the Bonduran Award for that, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But we've been doing a whole lot of work on energy innovation and energy conservation, and trying to make this kind of work in a very odd sort of situation. This year, oil's tanked, and so propane's cheaper than things we used to get as recycled free materials. So you have to kind of move around and shift a lot of these different things. I'm kind of a crotchety old farmer that doesn't believe a lot of the wonderful new things, but we do lots of new technology. I'm not so hot on some of the things like CoolBots. Once you built a CoolBot, if you just bought a real walk-in, you'd have a real thing, and you'd have a long capital investment. The CoolBots are terribly inefficient when they're running. Most people are not checking their electric bill, so they don't really know what's going on. We worked with a grower last year that had several of these things, and they cut their electric bill in a quarter by putting in a real walk-in. So I'm not going to give you any fluff, and I probably will be objectionable in some of my opinions, but year-round production uses lots of energy. So we're trying to grow salad mix year-round, and we got to harvest it every day and deliver it every day. And tomatoes and cucumbers, basil and peppers, and we just can't do double or triple covering inside to get that sort of effect. Now, one of the things that happens with a high tunnel, if you're doing a high tunnel and you keep it cool, the plants develop differently. If they get warm and then they get cold, they don't freeze and survive. It's a different cell structure. So the plants, so we've got spinach that's growing outside now, and we're still picking it, and we're shooting the deer that are eating it, and that's part of the FDA food safety plan, is that we have a kill permit, and our new governor lets us hunt on Sunday, so now we can shoot deer 24/7. So we get a lot of attention from the local police, the state police, and courtesy of the DEA, we have some really good satellite photos. All of you with a greenhouse will get them too. A little more so for me because I look like Chong and everybody thinks I've grown some really good herbs, but we don't. We don't even have beer in the refrigerator. I don't drink. I just work all the time. So there's nothing there. But one of the things, but the sheriff goes, "Oh yeah, we know where you are. You're going to the market every Saturday, aren't you? Do you think I could build a greenhouse like that over my swimming pool?" Like, how much? Even the troopers, you know, they all know who I am. So here's our farm. We've got 6 greenhouses, about 15 acres. You can see some of the strips in the land. There's about a 60-foot elevation difference from up at the barn here to our bottom field. This is Blue Run and Swift Run. They kind of run together right there. We get all the cold air every night from Swift Run Gap, comes down the valley, lands in our bottom field. We will see typically 10, sometimes 15 degrees Fahrenheit difference in nighttime temperatures. Creates a real problem. We were going to grow $40,000 worth of heirloom tomatoes right there for the food hub. What was that, 3 years ago when everybody got late blight? They all turned black, terrible. And Nathan, you had trouble with it, and it was horrible. I think we lost thousands of dollars. We never had any usable crop out of that because we didn't understand that microclimate. So these are some of the things some of the monitoring and things you need to figure out. And we'll go into a little bit of that also. So let's look at some energy conservation methods. We did, a couple years ago, the combined heat power cogeneration. We've done some geothermal this year. We heat 3, 4 of the greenhouses with waste motor oil and fryer oil. Used to be we got paid to go pick that up. I just got a call on the way in here, or well, actually it was last night. The bus garage for all the sheriffs and buses in the county, they now sell us their oil. And he was calling to let me know that it was no longer 50 cents a gallon. He wanted $1 a gallon. And I'm thinking, oil just went to a third per barrel. But the waste oil, everybody's got these furnaces now, and so now you can't get any oil. And there are people driving around with sucker tanks. They used to be sucking porta-johns. Now they're sucking fryer oil. So they go around to the restaurants and they suck up the oil and they can sell that. And that's part of the president's energy plan of all diesel fuel has to have a certain amount of biodiesel in it. Even if it's not labeled on the pump and it doesn't say biodiesel, if it's less than 5%, it doesn't have to say it, but it's got to be in there. So it's an additive now. And the oil companies don't care what they have to pay for it. They've got to put it in the diesel fuel. So it's created this real pressure on biodiesel and oil supplies. So there are lots of these kind of weird little things that happen like that. So here is our, we have an antique 1940 271 Detroit diesel, a 2-cycle diesel engine, 2 cylinders, 2 cycles, fires every hit, has a supercharger blower on the side. If you're as old as I am, you can remember Dukes of Hazzard where they drove around with those big things sitting up on the hood. That was a blower off of the 271 diesels. Every single rail car in the United States had one of these that had refrigeration. It ran the refrigeration. It ran the electricity in the dining cars. You can probably get them $3,000 or $4,000 as scrap now. They have a real man-sized piston. It's about that big around and that long, and you can barely pick it up. I mean, they are heavy duty. Terribly inefficient. They will burn vegetable oil, motor oil, almost anything you can put in them. If you can get it liquid, it'll burn it. And then we started doing some cogeneration stuff. So this is a heat exchanger coil, similar to what Delvin's using, except we're using irrigation water through it. So I'll show you how you can cool your produce with using the irrigation water as your dump for the heat. So your waste heat can go out in your irrigation. Make your refrigeration, air conditioning and stuff much more efficient. The clean burn waste oil furnaces here in Verona, Mike Morris will sell you one of these things new for about $10,000, used for maybe $3,500. And then good luck finding oil to put in it. And they are unreliable every single night. Leslie will tell you I wake up 2, 3, 4 a.m. and I go out and check to see which one's clogged up, which one's not burning. Because when they go out, I lose my heat and I have problems. This year, well, actually last winter, when we had a really bad cold spell and all that snow and diesel fuel was selling like $3.89, $4.29, we ran out of fuel for our burners. I bought $15,000 of diesel fuel to get through not having free waste oil. That hurt. So I'd call the propane guys. In April, we started working on propane. We didn't have propane working until December. I own all the tanks. We used to buy it from AmeriGas, and they started charging rental, so we bought out the tanks. Well, the poor propane guys, they don't know what to do if they don't bring you their own tank and their own regulators and charge you a big fee. So we had to paint them up and test them. We had to put some new valves in them. We had to pull vacuum on some of the tanks. And it took a while to convince the guys that we really knew what we were doing. And but once we got that going, they brought in, and I think my last propane delivery was $1.16 a gallon or something. So propane's now cheaper than everything else. It's wholesaling at the terminal about 50 cents. So if you got your own 9,000 gallon transport, you can do really good growing tomatoes with propane. We also do some wood. We have some wood burning. We haven't got any boilers going. We really want to do all boilers. And those tomatoes grow best with a hot water pipe under them. Forget about hot air. They just want a steam pipe running loop underneath them. And we'll get into some of the weather stuff and the disease, but really what you want is bottom heat on your greenhouse plants, because it creates a drying convection effect, stops the botrytis and all the major diseases, and the plants really like it. But it means a big hydronic system and pumps and water tubes, but you can heat it with anything then, anything you can hit that water with, so it's a much more reliable system.
Are those pipes on the ground, on the surface, or are they buried underneath?
You can do either way. The preference is to have them on the surface, and even some of them that you can raise up. So as the crop moves up, you can keep those hot pipes right next to the maturing fruit. If you bury it in the concrete, and there's a couple of greenhouses around here that have that, it's a good way, but you got a big thermal mass there. But if you need to change the temperature, you don't get as much convection heat. What you really like is having like 160 degree 2-inch steel pipe running right along. Steel or stainless. I mean, you can use poly now, but you're going to have.
Is that radiated as well?
Well, yeah, it'll work. It's cheaper. I mean, stainless steel is pretty high. All the big combined heat power things in Colorado that they make several megawatts of power and then just dump the waste heat into tomatoes, they're using stainless steel because they're getting paid for the electricity. And the tomatoes are a waste product for them. But the new polybutylene, the new plastic pipe works all right at that high temperature. It'll take up to 180. If you use a black poly, it'll kind of blow up. Yeah, the PEX. Used to be polybutylene, and put it all over my house and never heard about the recall until all the rooms started getting wet. And then for the propane, we're looking at something new, and this is really super efficient. LB White has direct combustion heaters. I can get 4 of those little white heaters for 1 of those red heaters. And they're 220,000 BTUs. It is direct combustion, so there's a big fire inside the box. The box is mounted outside the greenhouse. It blows the heated outside air into the greenhouse. There's no vent pipe. So all the fumes and everything from the fire, it's got to be super clean because it's blowing right in the greenhouse. That gives you very dry, dehumidified air in the wintertime. You're not reheating your moisture and watching it rain back down on you. Day after day, you're blowing dry, warm air inside the greenhouse. They run maybe $1,500. They mount outside. No stack is necessary. They're rated at 99% efficiency.
But they're heating the air, not the ground.
They're heating the air, not the ground. Right? But that is certainly your cheapest entry. And right now, if you're doing a greenhouse or you want to heat something with propane prices so low, you can put in one of those and do all right even in the first season. We use a lot of energy. We're at about 1,000 gallons of propane a week right now. All right, the combined heat power, the old dirty 271 diesel, it leaks everywhere, but runs, no matter, it'll run even when it runs out of oil. It rarely stops. So what we did is we put this in one greenhouse, and you can see barrels of fryer oil and stuff, and we ran that. Makes 20 kilowatts, 3-phase power. We ran electric power to strip heaters in 3 other greenhouses, and the greenhouse this was in would get so warm the ventilation fans would come on. But it runs about 1.5 gallons of fuel an hour. And it's not enough power to run the whole greenhouse. 4 years ago, when did we have the derecho that came through July 1st? Yeah, I got burned terribly because we had 5 of these little gasoline generators at every greenhouse, and one of them started coughing and acting funny, and it was like 1 and 2 a.m. or something. I went out there and was saying some nasty words to it, and it went boom right in my face. It burned me pretty bad, set the greenhouse on fire, and but we were out of power. The rescue squad couldn't get there. The fire department couldn't get there. We didn't have power, and I go to Leslie and say, all right, you drive the truck to the market. I'll walk over to the emergency room. And she said, no way. The skin was starting to fall off my face. And so I grabbed a big aloe leaf and went down the emergency room and begged with them, let me out before the sun's up. It's going to get hot, and I'm going to lose everything. This unit had failed. The blower had gone bad. So they let me out at 9 o'clock, and we got back, and I had bought another blower. I hadn't put it on. We put it on, bandages all over me, got it running by noon. After that, we decided we needed a bigger one. We went down and got a military surplus generator to run the whole farm. But here's a panel of the thing running, and we built our own electronic controls for the thing. And this is showing the 3-phase powers, running 120, 208, 3-phase. And it'll run 60 amps per phase. We got it to run about 70 or 80, fiddling with the governor and starting it out at 70 hertz. So when it got loaded heavily, it went down to 55 hertz. But that did everything okay except the computers. Computers didn't like that. But when our 5 horsepower air compressor cuts on, that poor little generator here, it really would lug. And that's the thing about the waste oil heaters. They have to have compressed air as well as oil. So if you lose your air lines or the condensation in the air lines freezes in the middle of the wintertime, you lose all your heat. Another one of their unreliabilities. So we're working on this funded energy audit through NRCS, and we started doing some geothermal work. So we went to Granger, and they had a clearance on these Comfort Air things as a $5,000 heat pump, and they were selling them for $1,500. We got a couple of them. Found out why they were $1,500. The coils aren't any good in them. But that little coil I showed you there was, you can make the coil out of copper nickel, or you can make it out of pure copper. When you make it out of pure copper, the flexing of the pressure changes will cause it to crack and it'll start to leak. And so sure enough it did. And it was under warranty, but we had to pay $1,500 to get the warranty part and then get the $1,500 back later, and it took weeks and weeks. But we put this in one of the buildings, and we used a system here. This is the coil. That's the replacement that I finally got. And what we did is whenever the air conditioning was running and we made all the hot water we needed, we used a couple of electric hot water heater tanks without the elements hooked up as storage, sort of like a solar storage. So we would dump all the air conditioner heat into the water tanks, and we'd make 130-degree water, which was fine for washing and showering. In fact, Leslie was like, you got to do something. I'm burning myself in the shower. Can't you cool it off? So that worked pretty well until the thing started leaking. And then in the heat of the summertime, we would just run the drip irrigation. And it didn't take but maybe 5 or 6 gallons per hour to go through there. But we have a 35-gallon per minute well. We have a 2-inch water main going through all the farm. In the heat of the summer in August, when it's really dry and we've got all the irrigation running, we can run almost 10,000 gallons of irrigation a day. That's the equivalent of 20 tons of refrigeration. That's a lot of cooling. That's more than Sam's Club has. So you could do a lot of cooling with that geothermal. So you just have multiple of these units. We actually hook some of them up to our reefer units. So rather than a cool bot and an insulated box, we have an insulated box with a real refrigeration unit, and it doesn't really cost that much more. And before Rob invented these things, we went through 15 cool bot assemblies, not his electronics, but the same thing of an air conditioner trick to run when it's not supposed to be running. And all the thing is a little thermocouple with a heater. And he tricks the thermocouple into thinking the room is hotter than it is to force the air conditioner to run until it frosts up. When it frosts up, then it shuts off and naturally air defrosts. But when it's frosting up, you're starving the compressor from oil. And you're also running the thing in a very low efficiency range, and eventually they will burn up. But it works for a while, and it seems a cheap entry, and a lot of people do it, and the USDA and everybody's putting out things like it's somehow the golden egg. If you've got the perpetual motion machine, if you buy this $400 thermostat, you can turn an air conditioner that's not even the right pumping ratio into a walk-in cooler. And it does work, but if you really look at the efficiency curves, it loses its efficiency. You can't get 34 degrees, 32 degrees that you need for your lettuces. And when you do, you're down paying 10 times the electricity. And it's sort of like pulling your horse trailer with a Volkswagen Beetle. You can get going on flat ground, you go downhill real good. But when it's really climbing Afton Mountain, you're not going to make but a couple of trips. All right, the waste oil, specialized furnace, has to have compressed air. If you do a lot of your own farm maintenance, you ought to have one just to heat the shop or something, because you can burn up all your own waste oil. You can't put paint in it, you can't put chlorinated solvents, but parts cleaner, hydraulic oil, most of the stuff you pull out of the tractor could go in this fryer oil when it's filtered, and it's a real good way for a non-critical heating. You can't heat human-occupied surfaces, or human-occupied spaces. Can't do that with that propane heater either. because there are some fumes that come out that it's not safe.
If you're burning used oil, isn't it filthy? What does come out of it?
It's burned, so it's an aspirated combustion. So you got an oil nozzle that's spraying heated oil. So the box heats up the oil, sprays it under high pressure, and then it's a dual cone. So there's another shot of compressed air that goes through the center. So it's highly atomized, and it burns really hot. And if you hook it up, if you adjust the air pressure wrong, it'll burn a hole through the side of the furnace. So there's actually a special ceramic target to prevent that. But most of the times they fail when people get them wrong, and it sprays up in the corner and burns a hole through the metal. So it'll.
So you're saying it's kind of like a catalytic converter in that it causes.
No, a catalytic converter is a different. It's more like a blast furnace. When we went down to Lynchburg to see the wood-fired thing down at the Longwood down there, where they have a high-pressure fans blowing this bed of sawdust up so they get a really high-temperature, highly oxidized fire. Now, what comes out is a lot of dust, but the dust accumulates in the furnace. It doesn't have black smoke coming out, but it's got a lot of dust in the furnace, and you have to vacuum it out like every 30 days. That dust might contain lead, cadmium, all the bearing materials from engines, so you need to protect yourself when you're doing that. So you end up handling some toxic compounds, getting the ashes out of that.
And where do you dispose of that?
We bag it up in sealed bags and just put it in the trash. But at one time we were firing it in a pottery kiln, making it into this ugly brown glass that was like totally passivated it so that you could, like make bricks out of it or something. But electricity got a little high on doing that. So the direct combustion propane, that's probably the easiest entry right now. They're really hard to get. They're about 3 or 4 months behind schedule now producing these. They're fairly simply made. There's just a great big fan burner and a squirrel cage blower, but they work really well, and it's a great addition for any greenhouse right now, and especially while the propane price is so low. All right, monitoring. You can't control what you don't measure. So we wanted to do some network monitoring. We did some Google Glass experiments there, part of the Google Glass Explorer program. The thing never worked right with my glasses. I was tripping over things all the time, but we still did some of the same network monitoring that was really useful. And we got into weather collection, which really helped us a lot. And computerized controls that can take some of that weather information. So, I mean, we all know it when we're doing the vents and things on the greenhouses ourselves. You see the sun going down, you close the vents early before it's actually cooled down enough to keep that extra heat in the greenhouse. So you need some predictive controls like that with weather data, and some real-time data usage. So we really knew what we were using. We had to map the farm, locate all of the fuel tanks, and then we started collecting our electrical data, and this is several months of every 15 minutes the instantaneous electrical usage recorded and plotted out. So you can see the peaks of every day when the fans come on, and then some dips at night. So now we've got tons and tons of data. What do we do with that? Part of it is electrical monitoring, knowing exactly what we're using in electricity. Because, you've got a farm and you've got all these things working off of stuff, and you pay a bill and you don't really know where the electricity is going. So we can now monitor, and I can remotely from here on my cell phone see exactly what the farm is using, and if there's a power failure. And oftentimes we have 3-phase power. Oftentimes we'll get a single phase out, and that really messes up a lot of things. And so we need to get back and fix that. And this is a chart from I don't know when. This morning, I think, of actual instantaneous usage. We were using about 21 kilowatts total at that time. We have a 240 delta 3-phase, so it's 120 on 2 of the legs and 208 on 1. So you kind of have to be careful how you hook it up, because there's one thing that will blow up your dishwashers and light bulbs. So it takes a little bit of skill to do that. But this really helps us. And when we switch over to generator, it's on the other side of the transfer switch, so we can see what the generator is doing, so we can monitor what the generator does. And we had sometime 18 months ago, we had a 48-hour power failure. We generated 90 kilowatts for 2 days straight. And now that generator used 50 gallons every 12 hours. So I had to make a few trips to the truck stop with oil drums. So I didn't have enough diesel for that. All right, weather data. Weather is really important. We have some webcams too. It keeps me from having to get out of bed and go check if I can look at the webcam and see, is the thing glowing over there in the greenhouse? This one down here on the bottom, this thing's not too well focused. This is a backup emergency heater. We've got a torpedo heater because this unit, one of those nice LB white heaters, has a defective motor and it runs for a while and then cuts out on thermal overload and the greenhouse freezes. So we have a torpedo heater back here that's a backup. So if I wake up and look at that screen and see that on, I know I'm in trouble. And I went and checked it. What was it, 3 weeks ago? We had 2 6-degree nights in a row. And I thought it was okay at 4 a.m. When I came back at 8, it had run out of fuel and we'd lost our lime trees. And I was upset with myself. This one is a little blinking thing down here, is actually the reflection of the flame out of the bottom of that propane heater. But we also have this other weather data where we have 2 weather stations. Now, why would we have 2 weather stations? Well, I was talking about the different conditions across the farm, and you all probably have it and don't even realize it. It was so distinct that the people at the Weather Channel and NOAA refused to accept the data because they said there's no way there can be this much difference. So we had to put both stations together in one location, leave them for a few days, and move them both together in another location for a few days so that they could monitor the data and see that the sensors were picking up the same, so there was in fact that big a difference. So the one station here, and you can find these if you go to Weather Underground, you just use these call signs or look at the map. So KVA STNA for Standardsville 1 is on top of our barn. That tends to get higher winds, warmer daytime temperature, and keeps the warmer temperature at night. Now you see all the wineries, the vineyards, they have big fans. They're getting that hot or that warmer air above and blowing it down. Some of the orchards will use the same thing, wind machines, to bring some of that warmer air down because the cool settles on the bottom. This station here, we actually have a second one there, so that there's 2 because it's so different that everybody keeps QCing it out and throwing out the data. That is the bottom field, the 60 feet of elevation difference. It's in that river bottom from Swift Run that gets all of Swift Run Gap's cold air off a high top mountain.
Are those something that you pay for, or is that a service that NOAA, like, you can have?
You pay for the equipment, okay, and you can upload it to them for free. They will track it and keep it there for free. Okay. And once your data is up there, it'll be really useful because then you can start running disease models on it. And that's for the uspest.org. So here's the microclimates. This is the actual, the NOAA sites. So the stations also have an EW code, which you just apply for these things and then submit the data. And once they decide you really have real data, they start to accumulate it and publish it. And it becomes part of the weather data of the whole United States that everybody can use.
So you get temperature, wind,
temperature, humidity, wind, barometer, solar radiation, and you can add additional leaf wetness sensors and soil sensors. We don't have those running right now, everything's frozen, but that can help you a lot with irrigation to know when it's when you need to irrigate and when you don't, and what the transpiration stress is on the plants. So you have a dew point that's calculated from the temperature and humidity, and that tells you a lot. We look at the dew point every afternoon to see what our likely low nighttime temperature is. Because the temperature is going to fall until it hits the dew point and the water starts condensing in the air, and that water dissolved in the air is the buffer. So when Susan's putting these second blankets over the soil, she's capturing this moisture and preventing radiation from the soil. And then as that moisture condenses and rains on the plants, it's like spraying them with water to keep them from freezing. And so there's a huge amount of energy stored in that water vapor. And so when it releases it, it's like stored energy. In fact, it's the energy that runs all the storms of the weather system. Everything, all of our hurricanes, everything is from hot, moist air that's full of energy colliding with cold, dry air. It's like the two poles of the battery. So that's what generates all of the air currents and everything. So if you trap that over top of your plants, you're actually storing energy in that moisture vapor, and then it condenses at night. But when it hits that point, you'll see the temperature drop, and when it hits the dew point, it'll flatten out, because now the temperature cannot go any lower until that water is removed from the air or turned to ice. So some of the last few days, last week, we had negative dew points, which meant the temperature could plummet rapidly. So that'll help you a lot to be able to look and see what the dew points are for early season frost protection or late season frost protection. So why do we do all this effort? Well, to tell you whether it's going to frost or not, like we were just talking about, give you an idea of the heat load. If you're doing wood fired, it's like how many truckloads of wood do you need to pull up next to the boiler? And to redirect resources, if you're worried about something, you need to cover something, or you want to run some sprinklers over the strawberries so they don't freeze. And the disease and insect alerts. And here is an overlap chart of the two stations where you can see that there are significant differences in temperature here between the lower field and the upper field. This was just yesterday when there wasn't a whole lot of really cold major differences, but there still was a difference. Just 1,000 feet away and 60 feet of elevation difference, there's that much difference. The real beauty is you get your stuff in these systems, they get onto the NOAA maps, and you can run, it's all free, uspest.org, and you can run these charts. And one of the things that's big important for us is probably powdery mildew with the strawberries and the tomato potato light blight. And that will take the historical data and will project out several days ahead for you when the spores are going to form, when the lesions will start, and you will know ahead of time to take treatments or make protection. Especially if you're using organic stuff, it's got to be on the leaf prior to the conditions. You can't go, oh, last night was perfect temperature, humidity for late blight, I'll go spray my sulfur and hydrogen peroxide. It's too late, it's already happened. But you get 2 days ahead of time, you can prevent some of the stuff. This is extremely valuable. Comes out of Oregon State University. You just log into uspist.org, pick a weather station close to you, or your own weather station if you have one, and you can run a bunch of models. There are models that will tell you when gypsy moths are going to come out, when the psyllids are going to happen, when stink bugs are going to breed. It's pretty amazing, and almost every crop has some kind of valuable model for that. Wood, we really want to do more and more wood. Unfortunately, I mean, each one of these really cool things goes up an order of magnitude in cost. We found a Garn wood boiler that would do 700,000 BTUs. We need 1.5 million BTUs an hour to heat the greenhouses. We could get one Garn unit for $35,000. Doesn't come with a building. It's not one of those nice little Taylor things with a building. They run about 200. So we look at that white propane unit, about $1,500. The waste oil burner, about $3,000 to $5,000. About $5,000 to $8,000 for wood boiler. So they keep going up. You get into solar, you add another zero. But
capacity of a standard wood boiler, I mean, how often do you have to add wood?
If you're heating a greenhouse, they'll run for a few hours on a load. So the bigger ones will do more. The idea is you're storing the energy in the water. So you have bigger tanks. This Garn unit has a pretty big tank, it's about 3,000 gallons. Most of the little home units are about 300 or 400 gallons. And it's a pressurized combustion, so it's like a blast furnace. Again, it's really clean. The exhaust comes out the side of the building. You can put your hand in the exhaust. It's mainly steam. But it's still, when it's burning, it's making 740,000 BTUs an hour. It'll do that for 3 or 4 hours. So you'll have some stored energy in that heat. But if you're heating a bunch of greenhouses, it's going to run all the time. You see them, I can't remember what it was down in Lynchburg, but they're running 3 tractor trailer loads of sawdust a day to heat the university. And here in Charlottesville, I think it's a rail car a day of coal. So they're heating water or making steam, low pressure steam, and they're heating the thing. So it's the same sort of system. So you end up with a whole lot of infrastructure, a lot of pipes, insulated things going all over the place. If you got just one greenhouse and one wood boiler, it's pretty simpler, or much more simple. But if you got a lot, there's a lot more. There's also biomass. We've got big piles of wood chips and they're steaming. There's not a lot of capacity there. It's warm, you know, it's 120 degrees, 130 degrees down the bottom. But as soon as you start running cold water in there, you kill the composting process, it goes down. So there's very little you can actually recover from that, unless you're operating a huge landfill of wood waste. Split firewood is probably a better usage. I know, I can't remember now, I think up at Mission Home, they've got one of the buildings that's run by a wood boiler, and it was 2 or 3 pickup loads every day. We were feeding into that thing in the wintertime. Solar, we wanted to do solar for our entire electric bill. It was almost $500,000. It would cover the whole barn with solar panels, and it would only work when the sun's shining. So if you wanted to store it, that was a problem. But Rappahannock would allow us to do net metering, sell them power back, or get a credit back on the meter and then use it later at night. But they cap it at 20,000 kilowatt, 20 kilowatts, 20,000 watts. For commercial, it's a little bit more. I think we might have gone up, but what we did is some small solar panels for our sensors. So all the weather stations are all solar. There's like a lithium-ion battery in there that charges and discharges, but it's a solar panel that keeps it running. We have solar motion detector lights all through those fields. They work great for the deer for about 15 feet. They walk around them, but it does spook them, and it does give you an idea when lights start coming on in the spinach that someone's eating it. So I think we shot 9 deer last year. And typically it's about that, between 9 and 12 animals that we harvest that are eating it. So that's within my freezer. That's why there's no room for any beer. It's all venison. You could do some geothermal capture. Several people have done that, where they run pipes through the greenhouse and then underground. So in the day when it's all hot, you can condense some of that hot steamy air and put that heat down in the soil. That's a much more affordable solution. To make all this stuff work, computer controls. There is a company in Canada. They specialize mainly in hog and chicken house controls. They're pretty inexpensive phase-on, much better than like the Wadsworth and the big greenhouse things here, which are $30,000 to $50,000 for greenhouse control, and none of us are really ready for that. But these things are maybe $1,000 or a couple thousand, and they've got software, and you can link them all together. And have your PC telling you what's going on with all your greenhouse and actually change some of the things and affect them with the weather. So you can make some of these predictive changes. This is a 16-channel phase-on controller. I think it's about $1,200 to $1,500. If you're handy, you can wire it up yourself. This is designed more for greenhouse growers. There's some that are for chicken and hog growers that are maybe $500 to $700. And they're pretty interesting. They've even got controls that'll sort the hogs by color, electrically opening and closing gates. So they're pretty interesting company, a small company, and you can buy directly from Canada to take advantage of the Canadian US dollar thing. Here's the inside. Unlike most controllers, they've got dry contacts right out, so you can control low power controls right off of that, thermostats and stuff. We typically will run 3-phase, so we'll have a 3-phase relay that's running slave to these contacts. All right, if you want to know more, Adriana's looking at doing some workshops here if there's interest for how to do some of these things, how to put some of the things in. Also, the REAP has a grant program for doing some of these unusual renewable resource things. NRCS will do cost share of putting in, like if you put in these LB white heaters and get rid of your old Modine heaters with the stack and put one of these things in, they'll do some cost share on that. Josh Ludgate will do the energy audit. You can't do anything with NRCS or REAP without having an energy audit first. So the first year you got to have an audit. for them to determine everything that you're using everywhere, what you're spending, what the typical remedies are and what applies to you, and a professional engineer signs off on it. And but NRCS will compensate you for that also. We do some consulting and design and help people get some things started.